Being open to the public, can I welcome members to the second meeting of the Public Accounts Committee for this mandate, and advise members that the committee meeting will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online. However, there could be a slight delay in moving to any private session or back into public session, so please be patient with the system. Can I advise that those in the public gallery, when they arrive, are welcome to use mobile devices as long as they are in airplane mode and all devices are muted. They can connect to the Assembly Wi-Fi. Password details are available on the gallery rules, and it is not permitted to take photographs or record any aspect of the meeting. We'll move on now, members, to agenda item 1. Apologies. Can I advise firstly that Robbie Butler has sent his apologies for this meeting, and from next week Robbie will be replaced on this committee by Mr John Stewart MLA. Robbie will be going to the Committee on Procedures. We also have a further apology from Tom Buchanan, who is unavailable to attend today. Can I ask if members are aware of any other apologies?
Padraig Delargy, Chair.
Okay, Padraig Delargy is noted as an apology. Thank you. Okay, members, we'll move on. Can I refer members to the draft minutes of the meeting of the 22nd of February at page 7 of your pack? And can we seek agreement for the draft minutes? All agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, and I'll sign the minutes. Okay. Okay, members, we'll move on. Declaration of members' interest. Does any member have any interest to declare that are relevant to this particular meeting? No? Quiet week. Okay, members, matters arising. Can I ask the clerk for an update on the use of the Senate as raised last week?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, I've been advised that work begins in the Senate in Easter, so at the moment all of the up-to-date broadcasting that is in this room and the other rooms it's not available until that work is done. It's likely to be, I think the end date is probably after summer recess, so it will be out of use throughout that period. I have notified the Central Committee Office that PAC has expressed an interest in future use of the Senate. So if there's any other updates, I'll let you know in due course.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Clerk. We'll move on. Can I refer, there's no Chair's business today, can I refer to a letter dated the 19th of February from Pivotal to myself as PAC Chair. Can I seek members' agreement to note the correspondence from Pivotal?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you, members. Can I refer members to briefing papers from the TOA at pages 21 to 348 of their pack? The briefing was set out the main principles in dealing with resources used by public sector organisations in Northern Ireland. There's a list, and for the sake of public record, we'll just note them. Managing Public Money, Northern Ireland MPMNI 2023 update at pages 21 to 25. Managing Public Money, Northern Ireland MPMNI November 2023, pages 26 to 220. Guidance on the Northern Ireland Public Accountability Audit Process, including PAC Scrutiny of Public Spending, pages 221 to 292 of your packs. And Regularity, Proprietary and Value for Money, Treasury Officer of Accounts 2004, pages 293 to 348. Thank you. Okay, members, can I welcome Mr Stuart Stevenson, Treasury Officer of Accounts, and Ms Julie Sewell, Head of Public Audit and Accountability Branch from the Department of Finance. Also welcome members to the gallery. Thank you. I ask witnesses to introduce themselves and outline their roles on the public audit process and provide a briefing on the role of the Department of Finance with regards to the committee. Thank you. You're both very welcome. It's good to see you again.
Thank you, Chair. Good to see yourself as well again. Afternoon, members. My name's Stuart Stevenson. I hold the role of Treasury Officer of Accounts. It's a post I've been in now for 6 years, and I play a very similar role to the TOA post as it gets shortened to in Westminster. I'm responsible for a broad range of areas within the Public Spending Directorate, and I'm based in the Department of Finance. Key role in my job is to support the Public Accounts Committee, and I attend all evidence sessions as a formal observer or technical advisor, just to help answer questions that may arise anywhere I can, and really just to help the committee explore the issues that we are looking at collectively. I look forward to working with the new committee and building a constructive working relationship, and I'll hand over to my colleague Julie, who's with me today.
Thank you, Stuart, and thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to be here today to introduce myself to the committee. I say my name's Julie Sewell, and I also work in the Department of Finance. Main part of my job is to support departments through the public audit process, from the initial stage on providing advice on draft audit office reports, through to preparing for coming before this committee on evidence sessions, and also providing advice when they are preparing the formal responses to the committee's recommendations. As well as this, a key part within that would be a lot of engagement with the PAC clerk, Lucia, behind the scenes, and we do a lot of that behind the scenes work to try and help ensure the smooth running of things for the committee. And we have a key communication from the committee through Lucia to myself and then to departments, so there's a lot of engagement behind the scenes. We've worked closely on that for many years, and we have a really good open relationship, and we pretty much support each other and help each other out on that basis. And hopefully that will continue with this committee as well. Obviously, also engagement with the Audit Office, another key partner in the delivery of the public audit process, and again, a lot of close engagement with Kyle, the Assembly Liaison Officer from the Audit Office. Look forward in the coming months and years to supporting the work of this new committee, and have to say it's great to see that we're now back to business and can get on with the job at hand, basically. Thank you very much. I'll just hand back to Stuart. Thanks.
Thanks, Julie. Chair, in terms of this afternoon, I was intending just to kind of set a little bit of background around the role of the Department of Finance, talk a little bit about the TOA role, and just to give some contextual points about some of the key guidance documents that we have provided for the members, just to kind of set some of the background for the work ahead, and maybe mention a couple of issues just in relation to the public audit process towards the end, if that's okay. Mm-hmm. So in terms of the DOF role, at a very high level regarding the use of public funds, it's important that we ensure departments use their powers only as intended, and that expenditure is kept within agreed limits. We are the department responsible for setting the ground rules for the administration of public money, and we're accountable to the Assembly for doing so. It is, however, the responsibility of the heads of those departments, the permanent secretaries, who I designate as accounting officer, to ensure that they control and account for their own department's business and the use of any resources that are allocated to them. So it is usually the accounting officers and some of their senior officials who will attend this committee to be held to account. I'm based in Public Spending Directorate within DOF. Our primary role is to advise ministers on the planning, management, control and accountability of Northern Ireland's public expenditure. Our three main aims are to ensure an appropriate share of public expenditure resources, to ensure that public expenditure is allocated, managed and accounted for in line with the programme for government and the requirements of the Assembly, and also to promote value for money on behalf of the Executive and the taxpayer. Across PSD we have 4 divisions. Central Expenditure Division would mainly manage the budget process and the big public expenditure exercises like in-year monitoring and so on. The Supply Division are responsible for making recommendations that feed into the scenario planning that takes place there, and also on the optimum use of resources. So Supply would consider the business cases coming forward from various departments on proposals that are above delegated limits, and they will provide the DOF approval where necessary. Our youngest division is a small team looking at city deals, working with partners in local government on those city and growth deals as they develop. And then Accountability and Financial Management Division is my own division. We have 3 branches in the division. The Government Accounts branch is a team that have a daily process in terms of managing the cash flow and ensuring we maintain efficient government on a daily basis. So we will draw down the money on a daily basis from NIO and Treasury, and then allocate that to the key bank accounts that we need to make sure that payment runs all happen in due process. Our financial reporting branch are responsible for issuing any guidance in relation to the production of annual report and accounts. We will direct departments to produce those key documents, and we provide the guidance to enable them to produce them to the appropriate standard. We also feed into whole government accounts as well, so that's another piece of work that we have picked up in recent years. And then the final branch is the public audit and accountability branch, which is really the context for most of the work that Julie and I will do with this committee. And Julie's already touched on some of those issues. Just moving on to the role of the TOA Chair, I just want to highlight some of I mentioned earlier that we issue the ground rules for the administration of public money, and that's a very important aspect of this role in terms of issuing the guidance. We cover financial governance and control matters, and it's a core responsibility of my job as TOA, and I have to formally sign off any of those guidance that goes out under their accounting officer letters will go to all the permanent secretaries and chief executives of all our public bodies, and some of the more technical matters will go out under a finance director letter, which will go to the finance directors in those organisations as well. The key guidance, we've picked out what we think are some of the very important elements, and they're in your packs for the committee, just to familiarise yourselves with some of the key standards and the processes that we will be looking at in this session. The key starting point is always managing public money, Northern Ireland, or you'll hear officials referring to it as MPMNI quite regularly, and it essentially is the cornerstone for our guidance for departments, agencies and the arm's length bodies. It's a principle-based guidance document. It applies to all those central government bodies in NI. It's 7 key chapters with some more detail in the annexes in behind, but it is a very readable document even at that, and we quite often the queries that we will be asked for a view on, the vast majority of them we're able to simply point to managing public money, and that gives us a really good steer. So I think it is a very practical document and very helpful in addressing most of the concerns that arise in terms of accountability and governance. It was first issued in 2008, and we're really pleased. We've got a refreshed version that came out last year in November 2023. And it is in line with most of the modern changes in terms of governance and accountability, and it aligns well with HMT's version. Most of the original principles remain the same. There's an annex attached to the DAO that accompanied the launch of Managing Public Money 2023, and it sets out some of the changes, but I think we'll touch on some of those in a moment. The second piece of guidance that I want to just draw to your attention is around regularity, propriety and value for money. And that sets, I think, the 3 key tests that we hope that all decision makers in the public sector will be focusing on every proposal and every suggested option. Regularity is essentially focusing on the rules and living within those rules. The propriety is more about the spirit or the ethics that we expect public servants to achieve and operate under. And then, of course, value for money is about economy, efficiency and effectiveness. The biggest single change to the latest version of Managing Public Money NI is the introduction for us of feasibility. And we think this is going to add significant value as we move forward in terms of governance and accountability. The definition talks about the principle that proposals with any public expenditure applications should be implemented accurately, sustainably, and within the intended timetable. So that allows us, I think, as a committee to hold our witnesses to account on those as we move forward. So we're delighted that that's been brought in. The third piece of guidance that we have just want to highlight today is the public audit process, and in particular the PAC scrutiny of public expenditure. Members from former committees will recall we used to point towards some HMT guidance that was very similar to this, and then we would supplement it with several pieces that allow us to bring in the Northern Ireland characteristics around the executive and so on. But we're delighted to say that an exercise a couple of years back, we've co-designed specific document now that incorporates all those NI characteristics. And the co-design is between the clerk and the colleagues in the audit office and ourselves. And we think this is a really helpful document in terms of setting out the key aspects. It's practical as well for helping departments and witnesses prepare for sessions. And certainly I think it would be very helpful, especially for new members of this committee, to work their way through it. I think it will give you a great overview of the public audit process and what we're hoping to achieve. Chair, just in conclusion, maybe just touch on a couple of issues in relation to the public audit process. Interim accountability arrangements. I think it's worth sharing with members, just in the absence of the Assembly, some of the things that have been taking place. And on a couple of occasions now, we've introduced a process for departmental responses to NIAO reports. Normally, reports would then, a department would formally produce a memorandum of reply that is formally laid in the Assembly, and that MOR then comes to this committee as well for consideration. In the absence of that, those departmental responses were prepared and cleared by the accounting officers, the permanent secretaries, and they were presented to the Assembly and also forwarded to the Secretary of State. We would have shared those with the PAC clerk on an ongoing basis, and they were available on our website, just to try to provide a level of accountability and transparency in the meantime. But now that the Assembly has been restored, I'm pleased to say the normal public audit process, incorporating the full element of memorandums of reply, will now kick in again and will flow through the committee. We do have a few outstanding MORs from the previous session, and in the absence of ministers, we couldn't formally lay those. So we've agreed, again, with our colleagues in the Audit Office, a process for tidying up some of those historic reports. We've written to accounting officers to provide the formal updates and clear with their respective ministers. Once those are cleared with those ministers, we'll arrange for the Finance Minister to approve them and present them to the Assembly. We've also asked departments to provide an update on progress to the committee in due course once that process has been completed. I think that covers the main points we hope to leave with the committee today, Chair, but very happy to comment further on any of those or deal with any questions that members would have.
That's very helpful, and I just repeat, it's very, very good to have you with us, and it is good to see normal business resume, and that we can get on with the work that needs to be done. So thank you for being here and for that presentation. I have a number of questions before we go to members. Stuart, is there a time frame for the clearance of MORs? Just a further question to that would be, what do you see as the biggest challenges for you in your role, your important role?
Thanks, Chair. In terms of the time frame, the detail in the Northern Ireland Guide to the Scrutiny of Public Expenditure sets out our ideal time frame for the whole public audit process. And certainly in terms of, is it 12 weeks, Julie, at the minute?
No, in terms of once a PAC report has been published, we normally would, we will write out to departments to commission the responses, work with them, but basically the whole process should be completed within 8 weeks, which I think was in line with other Assembly reports. So if once a PAC report, as soon as the day of the PAC report is issued, that's the day my note will go to the relevant accounting officer, and it's 8 weeks to complete that process, and we will kind of an iterative process over a couple of drafts, and then we go through ministerial clearance, and they're presented in the name of the Finance Minister to the Assembly. But that is all within the 8 weeks, unless there's some particular issue or difficulty, or sometimes it might need to go through next board or to the executive, but still the vast majority done with 8 weeks. And if we can get them done sooner, we do, because it's nice to get them off the desk kind of thing, get them to the committee as soon as we can. But 8 weeks is the standard.
Okay, and just in terms of the outstanding MORs, what's the time frame in relation to those?
We have written asking them to be done. We're basically hoping they will be done as soon as possible. To be honest, it's just depending on getting ministers cleared and getting them to us, but we are hoping that those will be done within sort of 2 to 3 weeks kind of thing. It's just a bit of refresh needs done and to just complete the process. But I know there's a couple already away with ministers, so we're proceeding with those as quickly as we can to get them to you as soon as we can.
Okay, that's helpful. And just in terms of way of background, before I go to a number of members, when you attend various evidence sessions, what's your role in that session, just to provide some clarification for the committee?
Yeah, I think the Treasury Officer of Accounts term goes back to 1870s, and I think it was brought in initially as a technical advisor on accounting matters. But and members with experience of the committee will know so much of our work now is around value for money. And I think we embrace the spirit of the guidance that we issue on accountability and governance. So really, I see the role as being there to help the committee on any technical issues that arise in terms of maybe interpretation of guidance, but also if we need to delve into some of the technical accounting issues, certainly we would be happy to address that as well.
And in terms of some of the analysis that is given in relation to value for money, how often has ministers not stuck to the recommendation to ensure good value for money? In other words, I suppose ministerial directions and other things that have just went above and beyond.
Well, yeah, Chair, you mentioned ministerial directions, and certainly in terms of numbers of directions, we saw a significant increase in the early months of the COVID crisis. Just under the circumstances, it was very difficult to get comprehensive proposals ready and to an acceptable standard and business case, and that had to be addressed. Traditionally, we have noticed an uptick in terms of the numbers of ministerial directions. We're pleased in recent years that we now have a level of transparency around those in terms of publishing them. And again, that's the good work of Julie with colleagues in the NIAO and keeping that up to date. It's a difficult one. The process is there for a reason, and certainly we would constantly be encouraging the key players, especially in departments, to follow the guidance as strictly as they can. It should be a very unusual set of circumstances that lead to a direction, but it is a difficult balance to strike, and accounting officers have a very difficult role to play at times, and quite often they'll feel that they need that additional level of cover from their minister and from the executive.
That's very helpful, thank you. Cahill?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Stuart, you're welcome back. Tell me, because part of the last discussion we had in the previous committee was about the role of the accounting officer, and more importantly the definition, because I remember the whole debate about who actually the accounting officer was. So we've sort of settled now on the permanent sec, but I just want you to maybe explain that to the group, because we need the right people in the room, especially when we're gathering information and trying to get to the bottom of what's really going on. Just outside of the permanent SAC, and we take it that person's the accounting officer. Who's next in line if there was to be somebody else come in? And also a wee bit about the arm's length bodies. If we were to bring in witnesses, who do we need to be looking at, or what's in definition? I just see here your definition in the document. So maybe expand a wee bit or explain a wee bit of that, please.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Boylan, for the question. You're absolutely right in your comment that certainly from a departmental point of view, the accounting officer is the permanent secretary for that department, and as such, they would probably be the most frequent lead witness when they come to this committee to discuss whatever inquiry or whatever issues are in front of the committee. I think it's always important, and I always stress this when we're involved in training the accounting officers and any new accounting officers, that while attendance at most committees, they are there on behalf of their minister. When they attend this committee, they're here in their personal capacity as an accounting officer, and it is about their decision-making process and the use of the public funds that they had control over. In terms of next in line, again, there's an onus on accounting officers to put in place sufficient resources within their department to enable the effective administration of public money. And as such, the senior management teams within departments, most will have a senior finance director. Certainly each department has a finance director at grade 5 level that would be appropriately qualified, and their advice to their permanent secretary will be critical in terms of the administration of those departments. And certainly we would expect on occasion they would be here in support of their accounting officer. You mentioned ALBs, and this is an area where in the past, going back significant periods of time, when this committee maybe had an inquiry around issues, maybe with a particular ALB, it would still be, the bulk of the answers would come through the department and the departmental accounting officers. And it's certainly something that we now, we saw in the last session, invites for witnesses that are chief executives, chairs and board members of arm's length bodies, and we think that adds to the accountability process by getting those people in the room, and I think you're absolutely right. We want to be efficient as a committee and get answers for the committee as best we can, and certainly it's something we would encourage. And with our new kind of partnership approach for arm's length bodies working with departments, it goes hand in glove with that and complements that concept that we want to see more people from ALBs at this table and addressing the issues as quickly as possible.
Okay. All right, Colin.
Good Chair, and good to meet you and look forward to working with you. I suppose just two questions, one sort of specific and the other one quite general. The first one is in relation to the value for money. I know in public procurement that almost became lowest price. So how would you assess, is there a matrix for assessing value for money, and is that publicly available, or is that a case by case basis, or how does that work?
Yeah, the guidance on this, I used to work in supply division, so I'm probably moving away from my current role, but I think it'll be helpful in addressing that question. Back in the day, we would have focused on the Green Book was an important piece of guidance that assessed major spending proposals, and the business cases were produced to that standard. That's been refreshed, and the latest guidance is Better Business Cases Northern Ireland, BBCNI. Probably that's been copyrighted, I'm sure, somewhere else, but it sets out the steps and the consideration that departments and accounting officers should go through. On a practical level, I always used to think you should ask yourself 3 questions. Could you justify this proposal to the person in the street? Could you justify it to an MLA? And would you do it with your own money? And if the answer is yes to all 3, then you're on the right track. If that's not the case, then I think you need to go back and do some more work. And when I was a supply officer for 8 years, that's the 3 key questions I would have always asked when I read through a proposal. And I think that's a fairly good establishment of being in the right place in terms of value for money.
And the second part of it then, thank you, Chair. Second part of it is in relation to, does anyone ever or is routinely assessed the cost of not doing certain things?
Absolutely, and I must have seen probably 1,000 business cases across 8 years in supply, and option 1 was always do nothing in the assessment of options. So certainly that is factored in.
Costed? Does it be costed?
It usually forms the baseline then for what the impacts are moving ahead.
Okay. in terms of not generating the cost, but the impact of not doing something?
I would need to go back on the detail now and check against the current guidance in terms of BBCNI. It's been some years since I've looked at a business case, but certainly that was essentially setting the baseline for that consideration and discussion around whether something's better to go ahead or not.
And just with the context I'm asking, in my previous role in health and also now in communities, there are things there which, if they're not done, they will have a cost and maybe a significant cost. And I just wonder, are we equipped to assess that impact?
Absolutely, and I think the nature of public services, the kind of investment appraisal decisions were generally around creating a net present value, a positive aspect. With public services, most of them are net present cost, and it's the least cost option then becomes generally a recommended option. But our economics colleagues would be probably better placed to advise on that, but I can get you some more information on that if that helps at all.
That's very helpful. Good questions, Colin. David?
Just lovely to meet you, Stuart. I'm Carl was Colin's newbies earlier, so it's a newbie on the committee, and to hear, just trying to get my head around sort of the role of the committee and how we function going forward. But you mentioned the feasibility, and you pricked my attention at that because reading through it come through. But can you tease that out a wee bit more? The feasibility, where does that sit practically in the process? And then what does it look like really on the is that pre-purchase or pre-agreement, and then what the time level of what that means, and then how does that present, or how do we see what that feasibility looks like?
Yeah, it's been introduced formally as part of the Managing Public Money in November. So what we would see in the Department of Finance, when a significant proposal is coming to us for approval from a department, the department will sign off when that proposal comes across that the accounting officer is content. Previously it would have been the regularity, propriety and value for money. Now we need to see that sign off on feasibility. So the issues around sustainability and timing will therefore need to be addressed in that business case. The business case approval process will sit before procurement or the construction process, or whatever the case is, will take effect. So it needs to be included as part of the planning and the decision making process at that point in time.
Okay, so following on then from Colin's point, so that feasibility, so it's in the business case part of it, right? So if you don't build it, is that then form part of that feasibility? Or whatever the process is, because that I'm thinking aloud, but I was in Lismore and Castlereagh Council, and the ice bowl was the thing in 5 years or 6 years ago, whatever it was, that was 30-40 million. Now it's, there's a risk. The feasibility at that point becomes not feasible at another point if you don't act. Yeah. So does that become part of that business case, or?
Yeah, and again, I'm going back to my previous role and drawing on my memory on this, so I just need to confirm it, but certainly business cases have a lifetime, and they need to be refreshed beyond, if an approval is given on a particular proposal and that proposal isn't acted on, then that business case needs to be refreshed. Business cases should also have factors included in them in terms of optimism bias to allow for price changes in raw materials. There should also be contingencies in there for the unforeseen elements that we know that occur as well. So there should be elements within a business case to future-proof it to a certain extent. Okay. But the cycle where that comes back round for refreshment is really effectively our backstop, if you like, to catch the kind of issues that some of the major construction projects find so difficult,
I'm not saying the Northern Ice Bowl isn't feasible. I'm using it as an example.
We've noted it now.
It's recorded now, David. I'm sorry, man. We do apologise.
It's just that piece of work. Whenever you have something in front of you and you're making a decision, the decision, if you don't act, can have effects that drive costs that then. I'm not saying ice bowl, but I'm just using that as an example, that something drives the cost, then it does become difficult to make it feasible then.
There's considerable examples of that, and the pace in which things move in this place. I'd say you're refreshing business cases quite a bit, so hopefully that will resolve itself. It's not even. It's just it's crazy, but that's an important point. Diane?
Yeah, thanks very much to both of you for coming. And Stuart, I just wanted to ask, in terms of the Treasury Officer for Accounts role and your issue and accountancy guidance, what sort of status do you give then to the Northern Ireland Audit Office reports of good practice? I'm just looking here, we're obviously deciding our work plan, and it's highlighted in our pack that the good practice ones aren't really appropriate for us to take forward as this committee. So that would they be something that you adopt and guide the departments as this is the good practice?
Yeah. The good practice codes are helpful for us. We would quote from them and use them in our accounting officer training programs, and they're a helpful source. And I think because it's produced by the Audit Office, it obviously gives an indication of their thinking on issues, and it's very practical. We feel for accounting officers to kind of point towards. Maybe some of our guidance is a little more formal, shall we say, and it needs to be because of the nature of it. But I think in terms of guidance, it's about creating a mosaic, if you like, for decision makers that they can draw on different elements, and certainly that's why we promote those guides on a regular basis. And it's particularly helpful on a practical basis for decision makers.
That's good to know. They're just really important titles there, and whenever they're taking off our work plan, I just want to make sure that we're confident that they're going out where they need to go.
Yeah, I would just add to what Stuart has said. Quite often the Audit Office will send copies of good practice guides to yourselves to have a look at, where we can maybe contribute or basically endorse them, kind of thing, and that's quite good engagement as well, because we have quite limited resources in terms sometimes what we do. So it's great that the good practice guides come out, but we certainly we would look at drafts of the majority of governance type ones coming out, which is a really helpful part of the process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just in relation to the Managing Public Money document, a note in the section covering insurance from pages 104 to 108 that it is recommended that central government organisations do not buy commercial insurance, but rather depend on central government to cover their own risk. Is this still as valid a point considering the state of public finances? Is there any particular explanation for that? Or?
The principles around insurance are certainly long-standing, and the concept of self-insurance as a government goes back some way to studies around the fact that the kind of losses and issues that we would normally have to cover is affordable, and again leads to value for money in terms of the cost of taking commercial insurance to cover most of that. That guidance in the insurance section has been refreshed to bring us up to date, and we have looked at some specific areas where it makes sense to step away from that simple principle, and we're trying to cover that maybe around particular site insurance and things on a construction project. So it has been brought up to date. We're in line with the thinking on this, certainly in HMT, and certainly I'm not aware of any issues that have been flagged up that's affected the public expenditure system in my time in the Department of Finance. So it's not beyond the realms, Chair. I can see where you're coming from on it, but certainly our experience to date is that principle works quite well, and we're happy. We've tested and consulted on the changes we brought in last November. So.
Okay, it just stood out for me. In terms of the document itself, and it's a final question I have, unless other members have any last thoughts, are there any areas of the document, the Managing Public Money document, that could do with a fuller explanation, or do you consider it comprehensive in its advice?
Sure, I would say Managing Public Money, we know from our experience with this committee and with accounting officers that quite often they can get deluged with guidance and maybe focus on the wrong areas. Managing Public Money was always meant to be a high-level strategic document that would give them a nudge in the right direction. And we have, on most cases, we would have more detailed guidance in the background. Those Dear Accounting Officer letters will provide far more detail in areas of concern, the kind of things that we would look at, especially for this committee, things like conflicts of interest and procurement, the various detailed guidance that sits beyond that. So in some ways, managing public money is a gateway document that gets you towards the right place, but it certainly puts you in we think, the right space in terms of where the thinking should be around it. That we have a plan to prioritise some of our guidance that we want to see updated in the future. The Corporate Governance Code, for example, is one that we think will help in terms of the structure for boards and the kind of work that they do. That's a priority for us. The Orange Book, all the risk management guidance, that's very detailed there, and the kind of lines of defence that departments and accounting officers should be thinking about in terms of risk management will I'm sure will be discussed in the session at this committee, and that's another area we would like to keep on top of. So there is some areas that we kind of see as coming offline. I think for me the balance with managing public money at the minute is fairly healthy in terms of it's a very readable document. I don't think there should be any accounting officers or senior managers coming here that don't appreciate the standards and the comments within it. And hopefully the committee find that as well when you're working your way through it. And certainly even the use of annexes within managing public money provides that little bit more detail where we think that's going to add value to the comments in the chapters.
Okay, so that's helpful. As long as the nudges prove effective.
We hope so.
Thanks very much for that. That's very helpful, and we appreciate you being here and taking questions from us, and we really do look forward to working with you. The work you do is important, and I appreciated the meeting last week as well, so thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, members. Thank you.
Okay, members, we'll move now into closed session, and we'll allow a brief minute to clear the table.
Committee Room 21. Sound. Committee Room 21. Sound.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I declare the meeting open for the remainder of this meeting. Can I highlight for the record that the committee made a number of decisions during closed session. The committee agreed on our first inquiries, and we have therefore agreed that we will consider mental health services as our first inquiry. I think members are unanimous in our view that this is a very important, relevant issue of huge concern to all people across Northern Ireland, and I think that it is a very important first inquiry for this committee, and we look forward to that as well. We will then look at other important areas going forward beyond that, but the following inquiry hopefully will be procurement, which is also a very important issue for this committee. Can I refer members to the memorandum of reply on addiction services in Northern Ireland, and can I ask the clerk to brief the committee?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just so, by way of background, the previous committee, they did their inquiry into addiction services, and that inquiry, the report was published on 27th of January 2022. So you'll note that this MOR is dated the 25th of March 2022. The last PIC meeting was the 22nd of March, so the reason it's coming to you today is that obviously there wasn't a possibility for it to go before the last PIC meeting, so it's now with you now. It is nearly 2 years out of date at this stage, but what I would highlight is that there were 10 recommendations. At that time, 6 were accepted. So the committee might want to see what sort of progress has been made on the 6 that were accepted. And then there were 4 accepted in principle, which means that while they thought, yes, this is a good idea, there might have been, various reasons why at that time they didn't think that they could actually do anything about it. So, for example, it could have been budget constraints. It could have been because there was another strategy. For instance, recommendation 6, reading it, they're suggesting that it would be dependent on a substance misuse strategy. They weren't sure about the shared card model under recommendation 7. So I think really, in terms of what this committee could do with this, would be, well, one, to note it, but to ask for an update on what progress has been made, and maybe request that they revisit the ones that they accepted in principle to see if there's any further thinking on that.
Thank you, Clerk. Can I seek members' agreement to note the recommendations as on the 25th of March 2022 and seek an update on the progress since March 2022 as outlined by the Clerk?
Agreed.
Okay. Also, members, just following on from a similar vein of the previous committee with MORs, I think it's important actually that we have a review mechanism in there to ensure that the findings are being implemented, and the time frame I'm a bit uncertain about. Is 6 months maybe, or a year? Would that be most appropriate? The CNAG maybe want to?
The guidance refers to a year.
Okay.
The last committee had got into a bit of a routine of every 6 months, so it's really for yourselves to decide.
Okay. Members, I'm happy in the interests of accountability and scrutiny and transparency to do a 6-monthly review of it, if all members are agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you, members. Okay, members, draft forward work programme. Can I refer members to the draft forward work programme, page 405, and can I seek members' views in respect of the draft forward work programme? You lost me. Yeah. Are members content?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members, any other business that you'd like to discuss? This may, for instance, include any items that you'd like to see maybe us consider in the future that may be of interest. I know there's a wide range of topics that have been discussed today, all of which are very relevant and important, but if there's any others that we have not yet touched on, I think maybe it would be helpful just to give an indication. Okay.
Chair, could I just ask, you had mentioned earlier, but just to be clear, in terms of, so we've picked these 2 that we're going to do in the short term, can this committee write to, for example, now the Health Committee to say, we just want to draw your attention, we're not looking at the waiting list report in the immediate term, can we just bring this to your attention or something? I don't really know what the process or protocol is, but you kind of, alluded, to referring to the statutory committees, and I just wanted to make sure that...
I think it would be helpful if relevant departments knew in advance of the direction in which we're headed, and I suppose that's why we were discussing a number of areas. One, obviously, a key priority is mental health services, which is important, and the department being notified, and then ultimately procurement. But I think it does no harm once we meet at the next meeting and outline our next 2 or 3 inquiries, that we then write to relevant departments and outline our direction of travel. I think that's much more helpful, and probably the best thing, members, that we could do between now and next week is come back with the other options that you would strongly like to look at that is already on the table. Okay. I think that's important. I know there's very strong views on a number of areas that members would like to see an inquiry on. Okay, Colin?
Yeah, I think just on that point, I suppose we should be aware that we don't send out we've picked these ones because we think we can make a quick impact with them. The other ones are, I think, nearly equally important. So I think it's a question of when, and in some of them and not if, and we'll work that out as we go along.
Yeah.
You content with that?
Yeah. No, thank you.
Okay, and aside from what was discussed today, is there any particular area that jumps out that members would have an interest in, or are you happy to continue focusing on the ones that were discussed earlier and then review at a later date?
Bad for now.
Content? Yep. Okay, thank you, members. Okay, the next committee meeting is scheduled for Thursday, the 7th of March, in this room, room 21, at 2 o'clock. And I want to put on record my appreciation to the Audit Office and all your colleagues during it today for your time and patience and for taking our questions and outlining very articulately all of the various areas that you have done a huge amount of important work in. So thank you. And also to thank the clerk and the team, committee team, for the work that you do in preparing us for the important work of this committee. So thank you, and thank you members for your patience today. The meeting is now adjourned.